Hi, this is Erica Merrill, and I'm the founder of Perfect Legal Video. I'm very excited to have with us today Attorney Nicole Reeves Lavallee. She has an amazing law firm out in the Worcester area. They cover both family law and real estate law, and she and her team are exemplary. Thank you so much for joining us today, Nicole.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Now, today I hear we are talking about exhibits, uh, how to decide what kind of exhibits are going to help prove your case, how to, I guess, show them to the court, and how to collect that information. So, tell us a little bit about exhibits and why they are important.
Exhibits are documents or evidence, and it doesn't have to be documents, but it's some kind of tangible that you can submit to the court um, to help support your case. I mean, that's what we're doing, right? We've heard about all these cases where, you know, was the glass full? Did the glass break? Is there a damaged fender? All of those things. It's all different types of evidence. Obviously, that's tangible stuff. And then we have the paper documentation, which is, the bank statements and the tax returns and stuff of that nature. So it can be tangible in either big form or obviously just paper form.
I just remember how exhausting it was trying to collect information. I mean, a lot of times you are going through pages and pages and pages of documents, bank statements, trying to figure out what's there. What do you recommend when somebody actually has to do that? Do you hire people or is there some quick way to get it done?
I think, from my perspective, I make the clients do it. I think it's very beneficial when they do it because they're going to be able to look at stuff. And more importantly, I want my eyes on it. I'm not going to trust somebody else to look at it and tell me what it means. I want to know. So I might look at it and go, hey, look, we have, $2,000 or $2,000 each month in withdrawals. And then we have 10,000. What's going on? We want to see something like that. Then I might be able to go to a CPA and go, can you analyze this for me? Because now I'm clueless. But obviously, my first thing is get my eyes on it, get my client's eyes on it. They're going to have a different perspective, whether it's their own or their ex's, because they're going to know what's going on in their lives and what those expenses are about. But certainly, I start with the parties themselves.
What do you do when it's cash withdrawals? Because I know someone that had a similar issue.
Cash withdrawals makes it a little bit harder because again, the paper trail disappears. So, you really have to go back to me asking at a deposition or asking at a interrogatories and asking very specific questions pertaining to this withdrawal, this withdrawal, this withdrawal. And obviously, the most proficient way to do that would be at a deposition where I get to ask, okay, so sir, you withdrew $10,000 on this day. And then you see, 2 weeks later, you withdrew $5,000 and ask them follow-up questions. What were each of those for? Well, where did the money go? Did it go into a different bank account? Did it go into a retirement account? Did it go to pay drugs? I mean, I could ask endless questions, right? So really, it's about learning where that difference is, and then more importantly, how to utilize that. Or, again, the paper trail disappears. I may be able to impute income for some of those things.
Well, what if they can't prove what they spent the cash on, though? I mean, it's kind of shady taking thousands and thousands of dollars out of ATMs. Like what? It's never good, I don't think, when you need thousands of dollars of cash.
And that's really boils down to, well, what are we looking at it for? Are we looking because we're saying that, they have a gambling addiction or they have a drug addiction? Or are we saying that they're hiding money? Usually you don't find the money going in to go out. You usually just don't see it in there to begin with if they're hiding assets. But maybe, again, you're looking at tax returns that are 3 years old and your spouse was planning to divorce you for the last 3 years. Well, then that would be a good way to show where is this magic money going and it can't be accounted for. In that particular case, sometimes the judge can say, yeah, I do see all this money disappearing. So I'm going to say that, wife withdrew $500,000 and she has access to that, and that's going to be a marital asset. Whether she liquidated it or stored it, the judge doesn't really care, but the judge can use that in equal division of assets.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you hear about people hiding cash in shoe boxes in their locker at work, and it's, I don't know, I find that kind of scary. I want to know where my money is, and I don't want it to be in a place where anyone can just take it or there's a fire. But those marital assets, I mean, do you see that a lot? You must see that all the time.
I've seen it all. I saw a client who received a very large lump sum settlement, well in excess of 6 digits. And he cashed it out and he put it in a duffel bag under his bed. I won't tell you that the other party stole it.
Wow. So, do you want to say what the weirdest piece of evidence you've ever received was?
I receive a lot of naked photos. I receive a lot of toys of the adult nature. I receive clothing that may or may not have been tattered. Or think of a Monica. So there's a lot of different things that I've seen in the weird realm. And from my perspective, I'm always going to say, great. Why do I need this? Because I don't really need it. But clients feel compelled to give me those things.
You have such a good straight face too for those conversations. I mean, it must be, what do you even say? Like, I don't want your toys and your clothing that has junk on it.
The good thing is I think everyone that has brought things to my office has properly layered them from my exposure. But by the same token, I'm looking at it going, I don't know that I need this. Like, what is the relevance? I had one person that took pictures of an entire room full of toys. And I'm like, great. Well, it happened to be in the child's bedroom closet, and the child was 7 years old. Now I understand the relevance, and thank you for not bringing the objects in themselves, and the pictures work fine. So there is a time and place that it is relevant, but a lot of times people are doing it either to, I need you to hold this just in case we go to trial. Okay. At the end of the day, I don't really need them. I usually never need them. And like I said, the photos sometimes are the best.
I mean, and that's good. So you've got evidence. You've got evidence that is going to prove that your wife or husband was using marital funds on an extramarital relationship, or they're doing other inappropriate things like gambling, like you said. I mean, I imagine that's a huge one that people don't think about as often when we look at these videos. But gambling is an addiction, and people have addictions to drugs and alcohol, and all that stuff costs a lot of money. And maybe they're using their money in the adult realms. I mean, it's all expensive, and most of the time they don't tell their spouse about it, and that is marital income. So, I mean, what do you do? You have to prove that someone is using this money on something that was unknown and that is incredibly expensive. I mean, even pot. I mean, you hear about people that are smoking pot. Yeah, it's legal and people do it all the time, but it is really expensive.
It is. And, again, those are things. The good thing is a lot of times they'll actually go there and it'll show up on a credit card. So that's at least a little bit more beneficial for us. There's certain places that you can't get it on the credit card, but a lot of times you will see that information, or it happens to be in the ATM right outside the dispensary. Just saying. 2 and 2 together equals 4. So, obviously there's some abilities that we might be able to read between the lines. It really kind of depends. And I think, It's what is the evidence? From my perspective, sure, I'm happy to air your dirty laundry in front of the judge and let the judge decide. The reality is, what I'm using it for is to have a conversation with that party and go, hey, look, we know your shortcomings, but how do we fix those shortcomings? How can we settle this case without me airing your dirty laundry? Because again, happy to do it, but there's a way and there's a time and place. So obviously, if you push my buttons and you're not willing to settle, not willing to negotiate because you're right, then great, we'll let the judge decide. So it really depends on how they want to use it. I'm not using it as a blackmail tool. I'm using it to say, it is what it is. Here's the numbers. Here's the documentation. It's supporting. I just got to present it to the judge.
And does it work? Usually, I mean, you have this information, you bring it up. I mean, is it good enough to be counted as, I mean, I'm guessing that most of this is to help figure out what the marital assets are. And if some of them were squandered, the other person still has to pay that half because, whatever they squandered should be counted toward the whole amount.
Yeah, and I think, it depends on the person. It depends on what their issues are. A lot of times when it is a drug addict, you're not going to get them to have a come to Jesus moment and realize, hey, look, I really screwed up and I need to fix this, and this is the way to fix it. But there's other people that go, yeah, I see it. Like, I know what you're saying. And I know I did it. I tried to get away with it, but damn it. So you kind of have, I'd say about a 50-50, and then sometimes it takes little people a little bit longer to have that moment. Sometimes they're like, hell no. And their attorney's going, but you gotta listen to me. And more times I keep telling you the same thing, at some point it starts sinking in and you start believing me. So even if I'm on the other side of that, at some point, if you have an attorney, you might start listening to them, and sometimes it's the judges beating you over the head a little bit to go, what are you doing? So it could be a lot of variables to figure out how to have that moment to reflect and to make the right decision.
So you find out, you figure it all out, and you can put that forth, and that's great. Are there other issues besides the money that you've found you really need exhibits for? Because they don't care if you're cheating anyway. So I don't know why, like you said, why they're giving you all this crazy stuff. They don't care,
Right.
right?
And I agree. I think, again, it's the same time where you're having inappropriate things in your child's room, that's an issue, right? That means that you're not necessarily the smartest parent, and you're not really putting your child's needs first. So there's some things like that. Sometimes it is, just pictures of things that happened. One party will say they're never around, and we're going, wait a minute, I've got all these photos saying I've been at every single school event and every single soccer practice and whatever. So, sometimes it's documentation like that. Sometimes it's, the Our Family Wizard app that has the calendar entries of all of the activities. So it could be a lot of different things that you wouldn't think. Sometimes it's an audio recording that somebody left on somebody's answering machine, or, cell phone message. So you have that availability. So it's a lot of, how can we prove our point? Because at the end of the day, it's a he said, she said match. And so any evidence that we can have in some kind of documentation to submit to the court as an exhibit, that's crucial, because that's going to sway the judge.
So it is super interesting. I mean, there are a lot of places where you can find this information, but I have a great question for you. You mentioned earlier that sometimes people don't know that they're getting divorced, but the other person does. The other person knows for years, and they start changing their behavior subtly. They're doing lots of things on the sidelines to prepare. They've got $160,000 under their bed. I mean, who knows what it is? But for the person that thinks that everything is fine and everything is status quo, do you have any, I guess, hints for that? Like, what do you look for to see when we could probably do a whole interview on this, but what do you look for to see when your spouse is planning to leave you and when you decide to start documenting? Because you always talk about documentation. Well, you don't really think about documenting when you're just in your marriage and you don't realize that there's somebody that can help you make them behave the way that they should behave.
Well, I think you got to understand that the first thing is I'm entitled to look at a lot of years. Mandatory, I'm entitled to look back 3 years. And then realistically, because of, you know, destruction laws and all that stuff, I can look back up to 6 years. After 6 years, you're kind of on your own. But how do you know what are the signs? Oh my God, that's such a loaded question that we could be here for like days on it. It really boils down to, are things changing? You know, the simple little things like, hey, he used to kiss me goodnight and now he just walks up to the bedroom and doesn't even say goodnight. You know, something's that nominal. That could be it. It could be, you know, again, he keeps buying new underwear. That's usually a telltale sign. Just saying, guys. Um, but or buying new clothing, or really, you know, going to work out at the gym every single day where they've been, you know, kind of a lazy person. So again, that change in their demeanor. Could it be something that they just want to better themselves? Absolutely. But any of those things, you know, I mean, a lot of people are going to have half the people are like, I don't know, my spouse handles the books and they don't look at it. So, you know, have that conversation and go, hey, can I just see the checking account? If somebody says no, or I'll give it to you later, and then never gives it to you later, again, just another sign. Um, it could be that they're forgetful, or it could be that they've been moving money out and they don't want you to see it. So, you know, there's a lot of different things that you can kind of do, but is there one thing? No, no, unfortunately.
I mean, the interesting thing is that I love this quote, and I know I've brought it up before, but you never know your spouse better than when you are divorcing them. And that is because you do get to look at all of the accounts, and that's really where you find a lot of the stuff. So I guess, my advice would be if you think anything's weird at all, definitely start looking at your bank accounts because I mean, I even found that the spouse was going to a very expensive hair replacement place, like a Chinese doctor in Newton. And I was like, this is a several $1,000s every other month. Like what? Why he didn't even mention that? Like, why would he be doing that? And it just then you add up with all the rest of it, the cash and the going to networking events on a Sunday afternoon, and it's a female person. Like I don't even ask because I trust it. And one day I just happened to ask, oh, it's that district attorney assistant, whatever. I'm like, really? She looked a lot like me too. But but you go back and you're like, oh, that all makes sense now. You feel like you're going crazy sometimes when these little subtle behavior changes. You're like, oh, it's just me. I'm extra tired today, whatever. But you're not crazy. You definitely look into it if you feel like you're crazy.
Absolutely. And I think the big thing on that is, you know, if you're having, you know, if you're talking to your friends, you're talking to your family, you know, you'll just be saying something casually and you'll get that look like, and they'll pause and then they're like, oh, I probably shouldn't say anything. And then they go back to normal, right? When you see that look, go back to them and go, what was that for? Don't worry, I won't be offended because there's 9 times out of 10 they're gonna go, oh, I don't want to get involved in their marriage. But now if you're inviting them in, they're gonna go, well, that doesn't really sound like Sam. You know that he wouldn't do that. If he's doing that, maybe something's going on with him, and maybe it's just something that they'd say just like that, and you go, oh, I never thought about that. But you're just having a conversation about what Sam's doing.
Are you allowed to use, I mean, people hire private eyes. I never had to do that because mine just kept getting seen in places he shouldn't be. I was very lucky. I got that for free. But when people do use PIs, I mean, they're following your spouse and you're finding out a whole bunch of things. Uh, like, what are you allowed to use in court for that?
Depends on obviously the PI's information, whether or not they're going to be willing to testify. So obviously, if you hire somebody, you want to know their background beforehand. You want to know their skills. You want to know their CV, so that we can figure out whether or not they're going to be an expert or they're just going to testify regarding X, Y, and Z. What are they going to be capturing? So obviously, anything that you obtain from that, assuming he's obtaining it in a legal way, you can use at trial. Is it going to be relevant in trial? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it's just something, again, to kind of push the other party over the edge to go, yeah, okay, I'll give in. So, and sometimes I've had that done and they found absolutely nothing. It was a complete and utter waste of money. So sometimes it is that.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing with a forensics attorney. I mean, sometimes you find something and sometimes you don't. And sometimes they just are allowed to scratch the surface and it's going to cost a lot more to really do a deep dive. So, I mean, you take those chances and it's like we've always talked about, you have to decide, is it going to be worth the extra time, frustration, money to pursue, certain avenues?
Absolutely. And it's people don't understand that. I think the biggest thing is they just want, I got this document. I need to show this to the judge right now. Time and place, guys, time and place. And so, you tell that to a client, they're like, no, but I need to know. Like there's a procedural process. Like I can have the best photos in the world and I have laid them down face up, pushed them as far forward as I can, knowing that the judge is sitting above me in color so that they can see it. Maybe I have a bigger print, but to get that judge to actually take that document and look at it close up, like right here, is a different story. But it's all about posturing. I spread it out. I made it very visible to the judge. And the judge every time said, I don't need to see that. But I got my point across. And that's where, again, as a good attorney, I'm going to be able to articulate exactly what these pictures look like, exactly what I can't visibly get the judge to see. I can mentally get her to see it. And that's what a good attorney is going to do. Because again, time and place. I had those laid out at least 6 or 7 times with different judges, and that one judge looked at it. Did I get what I wanted? Yes.
And that's so interesting. A lot of people probably assume that every single bit of evidence gets looked at closely by the judge, but that's not so. Is that right?
99% of what you want to show to the judge never gets seen. There's a time and place. The time and place is literally an evidentiary hearing, which is a trial. Whether it be a small trial on a limited issue like a contempt and it's a trial, you're getting up in the stand and testifying, or a full-blown trial. That's when the judge is really going to look at it. Other than that, maybe I'd say probably less than 1% of those other documents actually get shown to the judge during the entire course of your case. And that's really that it has to move the judge to go, let me see that. Which is usually like, oh, we did a hair follicle test and we proved that he wasn't the father, or we did we did another testing and it came back that he was positive for drugs. Oh, well, you just said you were negative. Let's go look at this. So, that's the judge going, yeah, something's going on. But short of that, they're not going to look at it.
And that's an assumption that people make, that all of their evidence is valid. First of all, like some of the crazy stuff that you get, the judge definitely doesn't want to see that stuff that we talked about earlier, I imagine. And, to have an attorney like yourself, and for those out there that do have issues in the family realm or even in real estate, absolutely call Nicole and her team, because they just know. They know the best things to do to get your case to where you need it to be. And they can, if it doesn't seem like it's possible, that is something that they will honestly tell you. And Nicole will honestly say that is going to be a waste of your money. You want me to do it? You want me to take the money? That's fine. But I just want you to know that most of the time you're spending X amount and there's no guarantee. And there's a low possibility, even in some cases, that, certain things are going to work out for you in court. Even some of the obvious ones, you're like taken by surprise. I mean, would you say that that's accurate?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So so of all of the stuff that we've talked about today, what is the best evidence and the thing that gets seen the most by the judge that is just a respected piece of evidence?
And certainly the bank statements give weight. Um, is it a smoking gun? Not necessarily. I think it's really, judges like to look at W-2s. They like to look at tax returns and the schedules. I think those are really important. I think they always like to look at expert documents. So something that's created by an expert carries a lot of weight. Um, Sometimes text messages or emails are your best friends. Just communications between them where they go, I didn't say that, really? Because that's not what this says. Or I was completely taken out of context. Well, yeah, but I got the first 5 pages leading up to that. So those are usually very telling.
So, Nicole's motto, you've got to document, you've got to save things, that you got to save those text conversations. Don't just leave them on your phone. Download them and have a safe place where you can save that information just in case you ever need it. And if you start seeing your spouse acting weird, even for a few years, you gotta start documenting now. And it's so hard for people in the middle of a divorce to document. But telling people to start doing it leading up to it the second they know that something weird is going on is really, I think, some of the best advice that you give.
Yeah, and it's hard because, I've had clients that come to me and go, okay, so I need to have these documents back. I took them from the secret spot in the house, but I need to get them back. Okay, great. I'm just gonna make copies of them. I'll give them, make sure they're in the same order and everything. Yeah, okay, I got it. And they're the ones that found these documents, and they may or may not believe there's the smoking guns, but they also know that something's not right here. And so they want to make sure I have them, but they definitely want to make sure the other person doesn't know it because they need to be able to start planning. And that's pretty much the first planning session I have with them.
That first session is always a doozy. There's a lot of shocked people coming out of that session, I'm sure.
I'm sure there is.
Again, another whole topic. Is there anything that we've missed? I know we've talked about a lot of different evidence today and what the judge is even going to look at. Is there any parting advice or anything that we've forgotten today that you wanted to mention?
I think the biggest thing is, like you said, document, document, document. And then on the other part of it is be patient. There's a time that the judge will hear this evidence. There's a time that the judge will get to know this information. There's a method to do it. It's not just immediate gratification.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. This was a fun interview. Not when you're going through it, it's not, but later on it is, and it's very interesting. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge today.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome, and have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you next week.